Hello there! So this video is entitled My Experience with the Shure KSM32 Microphone. So let's get into it. This is the KSM32 microphone. Now, it is quite nice to hold in the hand. I'm impressed with the feel and the level of quality of fabrication. It also has two switches in back. It has a pad, and it has a two-way high-pass filter, meaning that there are three different selections: off, and then it has what they call a high-pass filter, and also how do they phrase it? One is more to get rid of proximity effect, and it's a lower slope, this one here, and then this is your classic high-pass filter. So a three-way high-pass filter selector, which is, they seem to do it on Shure seems to do it on a lot of their condenser microphone products, but it is rare, so that's a plus. So I'm impressed with all the fixins of this microphone, let's say. I'm impressed with the build quality. I'm impressed with the switches that are included. I'm impressed with the velveteen pouch that it comes with. You put the microphone in, and here you have the suspension, the spider that you use to put the microphone on a stand. The case it comes with is quite nice too. So as far as all the accessories and as far as everything is concerned, technically speaking, it's a pretty impressive microphone for the price. So now let's get into how it sounds, because that's the most important, right? And here it gets a little trickier. It's not your average microphone, because if you're not aware of this, the average large diaphragm condenser microphone has a 1-inch diaphragm, right? You won't be able to see it through the screen here very well, but if you look at a condenser microphone, you usually have this lollipop circle inside the screen that you probably can't see on this video. But if you look carefully, you put it in front of a window, for example, you can see the shadow of the diaphragm. I'm doing it right now through your condenser microphone if you can't see it. On some of them you can see it even easily, okay? So that diaphragm size for a large diaphragm condenser microphone, LDC for short, is classically 1 inch in diameter, okay? And for your classic small diaphragm condenser microphone, SDC, it's 1/2 inch. Well, Shure with the KSM32 decided to do something not standard. And the diaphragm size here is 3/4 of an inch. So it has this sound that is kind of between a large diaphragm condenser and a small diaphragm condenser. Now, I don't know if you, the listener, has actually worked with both a large diaphragm condenser and a small diaphragm condenser, so that you know what that sounds like, but I have, and I'll try to give you a little indication of what it sounds like, because the way this microphone sounds is basically somewhere in the middle, as you might expect, because the size of the diaphragm is somewhere in the middle between a large diaphragm condenser and a small diaphragm condenser. And one way to describe the difference, I think, is that a large diaphragm condenser has more precision in the bass response. And often that ends up meaning that the bass response of a large diaphragm condenser ends up sounding a bit tighter, a bit more, like I said, more precise. Whereas the high frequencies of a large diaphragm condenser are a little less precise, which gives large diaphragm condensers that classic lead vocal sound that you're used to hearing, because almost all vocals are recorded on large diaphragm condensers. And a small diaphragm condenser, on the other hand, sounds a little, the bass sounds a little less defined. It can often sound a little muddy if you don't use a high-pass filter, or a little less precise, a little woo 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 type noise, if you know what I mean, if you've worked with that type of condenser before. So there are advantages and disadvantages, but of course a small diaphragm condenser, which is the last point, logically speaking, also has a more precise top end, which can be good or bad depending on what you want, because for a lead vocal, people are used to hearing the sort of distortion in the top end that you get when recording a lead vocal with a large diaphragm condenser. So now what I'm going to get to with this is that this microphone is somewhere in between the two. So when you record a lead vocal with the KSM-32, on the one hand it sounds a bit thicker and deeper than a normal large diaphragm condenser. And yet at the same time, that low end sounds a bit less precise, a bit less tight, you could say. And so if you're not careful, it can get muddier a bit quicker, or a bit overbearing a bit quicker. If you've ever tried to record a lead vocal with a small diaphragm condenser, you'll know what I mean. It has this weird, it sounds weird. We're not used to hearing lead vocals recorded with small diaphragm condensers. I've tried it before. I've experimented with these things. And I've never ended up keeping a lead vocal that I've recorded with a small diaphragm condenser. Never. It just sounds too weird. Now this microphone has some of that. But I will say I have ended up keeping some of the lead vocals I've recorded with this microphone, so it's not to the same point that a small diaphragm condenser is, but it does go in that direction. And it is occurring to me at the same time, if you look into it, some of the Audio-Technica so-called large diaphragm condensers are also 3/4 of an inch like the KSM-32 is. So, which gives them also a similar type sound. Obviously, the particular microphone, not all large diaphragm condensers sound the same, I'm sure you know. Not all small diaphragm condensers sound the same. Some have more bass, some have more top end, etc. They all have their unique characteristics, and this microphone definitely has a Shure microphone sort of sound if you're used to listening to that type of thing and you know how to listen for it. But at the same time, there are similarities between SDCs and similarities between LDCs. And basically what I'm trying to say is this is not a classic microphone. It's really not. It's a little different. It's not gonna sound just like the records you're used to hearing when you put it on an acoustic guitar, because we're used to hearing SDCs on acoustic guitars in most major productions. And it's not going to sound just like you're used to hearing a lead vocal sound like when you put it on a lead vocal, because we're really used to hearing LDCs, which are 1-inch diaphragm condenser microphones. So, if you're looking for something really classic, this ain't it. This is not a classic condenser microphone. On the other hand, it does sound pretty good. There has a lot of positive qualities. And I know that most people, from what I've read, buy this microphone to put it on drum overheads. Now, I don't really record too much percussion in my studio, but I do record a cajon sometimes that I play. I usually on my recordings either use drum software, or if it's a more acoustic recording, sometimes I'll go with the cajon that I play. And I must say, if you want a fat sounding cajon, this microphone is really awesome. I was pretty blown away when I first tried to use this microphone on cajon. And so I can really understand and appreciate how people would love it on drum overheads, because drum overheads are far away, and then, you know, it's probably harder to get a really fat sound at that distance. Well, I can tell you, this microphone is really capable of, particularly on, like I said, on percussion, giving, for whatever reason, this really fat sound. You might not want that. Again, it depends on how you want it to fit into your production, because when I put cajon in my productions, I usually record the back of the cajon with an RE20, which is already a pretty damn fat microphone. So putting the KSM32 on the front of the cajon and the RE20 on the back of the cajon, I must say, for most songs, it's probably a bit too over the top. It like just takes up the whole spectrum. And you know, it just captures too much attention for the song. So again, it depends on what you want. But maybe, again, if you record, I can't tell you what it sounds like as a drum overhead. There are samples out there that I've heard, but I can't tell you from personal experience of something that I've recorded. But I can really extrapolate from that and really believe that it's quite an awesome microphone for drum overheads. And like I said, if I wanted fat sounding drums, it's a microphone that I would really consider if you're looking for a percussion microphone in general. And so finally, maybe I should say how I feel about this microphone on lead vocals. And I'll say it's kind of hit or miss. It's kind of, when I record lead vocals with a condenser microphone, which is not all the time, you know, I do really like the Shure SM7B, which is a dynamic microphone that probably most of you are very familiar with, or at least know enough about. I record a lot of my lead vocals with that microphone. But when I decide to go for a condenser microphone, I have the choice at this point between the Mojave MA201, which I also have a video about, you can check out, and the KSM32. And sometimes I end up thinking, you know, if it's a really full production, then the Mojave can be really good. If it's a sparse production, the Mojave can sound a little thin. And as I told you on the video about the Mojave MA201 FET, the lowest octave of my voice when I sing lower, you can see it on the spectrograph when you do your EQ. If you use a EQ plugin that shows that to you, the lower octave of my voice is not reproduced very strongly, you know. The level is taken down, versus if that microphone was really a flat capture of what my voice produced, as you know, because I have experience with other microphones, I know, especially compared to the KSM32, where the lower octave of my voice when I sing lower is reproduced as is, you know. It's really, that's another thing about the KSM32. It really is quite a flat microphone. I wouldn't say so neutral. Some people say neutral. It's not really a neutral mic to me. It does have a very specific Shure, meaning the brand Shure, type sound that's recognizable. It's neutral in the sense that the frequency response is fairly flat. It doesn't have a hyped top end like a lot of condenser microphones have these days. So if you're somebody who's pretty allergic to a hyped top end on a condenser microphone, you might want to consider this one. I think I would like to have a little bit more of an air band. The part of this microphone that is accentuated, which is the case often for Shure dynamic microphones, is, you know, around 5 kilohertz. Here it's a little bit wider of an upper mid boost, so it goes more into 6 kilohertz too on the KSM32. But as far as what you would call air in a microphone, which is often 8 kilohertz, 10 kilohertz, the KSM32 has less than most condenser mics have. So sometimes when I use this as a lead vocal, I find that I really want more air here. So when, again, getting back to my choice of lead vocal microphones, when I'm doing, when I've decided I'd like to go for a condenser microphone sound on the lead vocal, and I have to choose between the Mojave MA201 FET and the KSM32, it often comes down to whether it's a sparse production or a more dense production. On a dense production, I'll often use the Mojave because I don't want that extra bass in there. And on a sparse production, usually I don't need the microphone to cut as much. The Mojave also has a bit more air to it, so it cuts a little bit better in a dense mix, where the KSM32 isn't going to cut quite as well because it doesn't have quite as much air, and it can make the mix sound a bit muddy in the end if it's a dense production because it has quite a, you know, full bass response to it. So it's a good microphone, again, for sparse productions. You know, if I have a song that I'm doing that has acoustic guitar, lead vocal, cajon, that type of thing, KSM32 for lead vocal is really a nice choice. So I guess I'll wrap it up at this point. I rambled on long enough already. So how would I summarize the KSM32 microphone in my experience? It's really I'm really impressed with the accessories that Shure has put in there for the price. I do wish that it had, sometimes, that I had a bit more of a classic large diaphragm condenser microphone sound, which it does not to me. So as a lead vocal microphone, you're not going to get the classic sound if you're really just looking for a classic sound. The way it responds even to your voice dynamically, you can tell it's not a classic large diaphragm condenser. And if you want to know, again, how that goes, if you have a small diaphragm condenser, go ahead and try that on a lead vocal and see what you think. You probably won't be too happy. And this, as I said before, is kind of since the diaphragm is halfway between 1 inch and 1/2 inch, well, the sound you get is kind of halfway between the two as well. But it does have a certain charm. So I would note it kind of average for lead vocals. I do use it sometimes. I definitely won't say that I never use it, but I have some reservations about it. I haven't mentioned the how I like it on acoustic guitar. On acoustic guitar, I hardly ever use it. For some reason, it just doesn't really do it for me on acoustic guitar. Again, I don't really use it anymore on acoustic guitar, but it could work on a more sparse production. But it tends to be, as I said, a little bit tubby, even if you engage the high pass filter. Too much bass compared to what you usually want on an acoustic guitar in most productions. Great percussion microphone, an average vocal microphone that's kind of specific, kind of a character microphone as far as lead vocals are concerned. That's the way I see it. And I have tried to use it as well on recording bass amp or an acoustic bass, and the trouble I've had there is that it tends to grab the upper mid-range a bit too much, such that the bass kind of interferes with my lead vocal. That's my experience with it. So I don't really use it to record bass anymore. I stay to my RE20, my Electro Voice RE20, which I love for recording either bass cab or acoustic bass. Gives me a full neutral sound without, everything's there, but it doesn't, get in the way of my lead vocal like the KSM 32 has for me and when I've tried it before. So there you go, you percussion guys, I think this mic is for you. And you people that want to try to do something a little bit different once in a while to mix things up for a lead vocal or a backing vocal, I think it's definitely an interesting microphone, but it's not a classic lead vocal microphone. And I'm not so excited about it on acoustic instruments or on guitar cab or bass cab, really. But it has quite an impressive array of accessories that come with it, and the quality, the manufacturing quality is quite high. There you have it. I've gone on long enough. That is my experience with the KSM 32 microphone made by Shure. Bye-bye.